Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Ellingson. I'm one of the folk art education coordinators at Vesterheim Folk Art School, and we are just delighted to have you here with us today. Today's concert is being recorded and will be available at a later date on the Vesterheim YouTube channel. For today's program, you are invited to actively participate by using the Q&A function to ask a topic-related question. We will focus most of the questions. I'll be popping them in and out as they come up, but we may save some of them for the end. And you can use the Q&A session, the Q&A function to submit those. You can also use the chat feature to type messages to the panelists or other attendees. Please be mindful of when you're chatting with the panelists and attendees or just the panelists. For any technical needs or administrative questions, you can chat panelists. Closed captioning is available through Zoom for today's presentation, and I'm going to go ahead and turn that on right now. To turn it off, if you are on a computer, you can use the CC button at the bottom of your screen, or if you are on a mobile device, you can find it in the settings for closed captioning in the meeting settings section of the three dots menu. Today's event is an online event that is part of our FamilieTid series of free online family programming. Support for Vesterheim's FamilieTid and Familie Club programs is provided by the American-Scandinavian Foundation. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Casey Driessen. Casey Driessen is a Grammy-nominated fiddle player who loves to experiment, collaborate, teach, travel, and push the boundaries of his instrument. Over the past 14 years, Driessen has released 3 solo records, toured as a one-man live looping show called The Singularity, produced and engineered records, and traveled the world playing music and teaching in 22 countries and on 4 continents. His work includes Other Lands, global music exploration, the Chop Notation Project, and collaborations with numerous musicians and teachers around the globe. He lives with his family in Asheville, North Carolina, and continues to travel the world. Casey, thank you so much for being here today. We are just delighted to kick off this series with you.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right.
Shall we get it going?
Let's do this.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Leah, for helping make this possible. And thanks to my old pal, Benji Nichols from college that also helped to put us all, helped unite us all together here today. So, yeah, my name's Casey Driessen, and just to give you a little bit of background, what we're kind of talk about and hang out with today is this Other Lands project that I have. And it's an idea that started many years ago. But basically, in a nutshell, I traveled to 6 different countries over the course of 9 months with my wife and my daughter. And this started back in 2019, around September. I had finished up a job that I was doing in Spain. We were getting ready to move back to the United States. And many years before this, my wife and I had the idea that wouldn't be great if we could somehow figure out a way to combine our love of travel and music and take our daughter around the world, take our family around the world, and find a way that music could be our path. And what I've always really loved collaboration with folks, and so I wanted to start a collaborative music project as well. So the idea is that we'd go around to these different places. I would bring a couple little cameras, just basically what I could fit in one case because we were traveling for a long time, some microphones, and I would find local music masters in their traditions in these places that we were traveling. I'd meet them in their homes, in pubs, at studios, basically wherever I could find them. And we would sit down for maybe 2 hours, or maybe it was a full day, and I would capture as much as possible and share it along with people as we were doing our travels. So that's basically the premise for this whole project called Other Lands. And we returned about a year ago. And so now, as you know, it's more difficult to travel right now, so I don't have any of my collaborators with me, but I have a lot of new music that I've learned from a lot of places around the world. And I wanted to share a few stories about these travels with my family, and I wanted to share some of these tunes and just kind of give you an idea of what it was that happened when we were out there, and hopefully maybe turn you on to some new traditions. So I'm more than happy to answer questions if people have them. It could be about family, it could be about travel, it could be about music, anything that you would like to know about. Go ahead, feel free to ask questions, and we'll get to them. I'll get to them as I'm able to do. So thanks everybody for being here. I think a good way to maybe sum up this project, I've got a little trailer for the project. It ended up being a 26 video a series of 26 different videos, short videos, a record, a workshop series, and a whole bunch of stories and blogs about the experience. But I got a little trailer here that will give you an idea of kind of what happened while we were out there. And I will go ahead and share that right now.
It's a nice song, isn't it?
It's beautiful. All right, so that was basically Spain, Ireland, Scotland, India, Japan, and Finland. Finding local music and local experiences, and really just trying to immerse ourselves as a family and me as a musician in these traditions and see what would happen basically after a year. So that's in a nutshell what happened there. So our first stop happened to be the country that we were living in at the time, which was Spain. And I consider it the first stop because there was plenty to do in Spain before we actually left there for good, and places that we hadn't seen, and musicians that I really wanted to meet with before we left. So where we went to was up in the northwest corner of Spain in an area called Galicia. And it's actually part of the Celtic tradition. So it's just sort of south of Ireland and Scotland there. And they've got bagpipes, they've got bouzoukis, they've got fiddles, they've got percussion instruments, got many things that feel a little bit on the Celtic side. They've got some of the same sort of rhythms and grooves, but then there's something about the way that the harmony works and the scales that they use that also gives it its completely its own flavor. And so the first song I'll play for you today is from that area. of Galicia. So it's like this is a jota, which is a tune in 6/8, kind of like a jig would be up in Ireland or Scotland, for example. And but the scale is a little bit different. It's a 3-part tune. When I was playing it, I played with a bouzouki player and a guitarist. And this was actually the very first Spanish tune that I ever learned, but I didn't actually learn it in Spain. I learned it when I was down in Florida. I was at a fiddle camp, and this is like at the beginning of video conferencing technology, which we're also very familiar with right now. 2 different camps that were happening. One was in Florida, one was in Spain, and we Skyped into our camps, and each camp taught the other camp a tune. And so when I happened to be teaching, this is before I even ever went to Spain, I learned this tune from Galicia. So for me, it was really important to go and travel to this area and get the chance to play this tune where it actually comes from. It's called A Minha Borinha. And, I need to introduce my band a little bit. So this is my fiddle, of course, right here. And down under the desk, I've got the rest of my band members, and I use my feet to engage them. For example, I would like to say hello to everybody today. I'd like to say hello to everybody today. I'd like to say hello to everybody. So I can go ahead and loop anything that I'm doing. I'd like to say hello to everybody today. I can replay it, and I can add stuff on top of it as well. And then they can all play together, and then it becomes some sort of big band on top of it as well. And then I can also stop them when they get out of hand. So you'll hear a couple fiddles happening, but it's all happening live, and we'll cross our fingers and hope that everything happens in time. This is A Minha Borinha. right, so that's A Miña Boriña from up in the northwest corner of Spain. And where'd we go next? Well, we headed up towards the other Celtic regions. And our first stop was Ireland. So again, this is me and my wife and my daughter, who at the time was, she was 10 years old. And she was already a fluent Spanish speaker because we lived in Spain for 4 years, which was amazing. And I'm so happy for that for her. And so now we're heading out of Spain. It was kind of a little bittersweet because we had been there for a long time, and it was kind of like it was really kind of saying goodbye to Spain and this sort of, well, we had no idea what was going to happen for the next 9 months. We were just going for this adventure. So up in Ireland, we went over and spent most of our time on the western coast. We went over to Galway. The western coast of Ireland is absolutely beautiful. It's called the Wild Atlantic Way, is what they call it there. There's tons of cliffs along the edges there. It's really green and beautiful and lush. Yeah, what else can I say? You got to go to the west coast of Ireland if you can get there. Do it. So I'm normally traveling when as a musician. I'm going from one place to the other. It's very rare that I spend more than like 2 days in one place unless I'm teaching at camp. And but that wasn't the way that was going to work for my family, and I'm really glad that they sort of stopped me from doing that, because in Ireland we actually stayed in one place for 3 weeks, and that gave us the chance to really get to know the town and the area and not feel rushed when we were there. Figure out how do the grocery stores work? You know, how do we get around? How do we, just how do we live as a family? Because we were also homeschooling along the way as we were doing this too. And I was looking for music. Now in Ireland, they have a pretty good reputation for pub sessions, and it's a great music scene over there. It seems to be integrated with just everyday life all the time. You can go out and find a traditional music session probably in about just every town. We went to these little places that had like 3 of them happening in the town. You know, it seems like more than even one town would need, but apparently they need them. So I went out and I would learn these. Well, I will say I've been to Ireland a couple times. I learned a few tunes, but the way that the tradition works is they sit in these sessions and they play tune after tune. They do these sets of tunes, and they'll play like one tune, then they'll play it like 2 or 3 times, and they'll play another one, and then they'll play another one. They'll string them together. And when you're a guy like me coming from another tradition, it's pretty hard to learn a tune that fast, in time for the next one to start, So what I would do is I would sit down next to whoever was playing rhythm, and I would find the chords, and I would play rhythm along with them and try and get some of the melodies. But that's just sort of that's the experience for me. So if you want to get into some Irish sessions over there, start learning a bunch of tunes. Hey, there's a great book, O'Neill's Music of Ireland. This was recommended to me when I was over there. It's like over 1,000 fiddle tunes, it says. So you better get started. I'll play a little set of tunes so you can kind of hear what it's like to have these tunes strung together. This was a set that I played with a bagpiper, an uilleann pipes player. It's the Irish bagpipes, and his name is Blackie O'Connell. And then with a bouzouki player named Cyril O'Donoghue. And we're at this little pub in Doolin. It's on that western coast of Ireland. So this is 3 tunes. The first one's called The Musical Priest. The second one is called Toss the Feathers. And the third one is called Lucy Campbell's. And these are reels, R-E-E-L-S. And they are considered like the powerhouse tune. It's the 4/4, high energy kind of rock and roll fiddle tunes, or traditional tunes, I guess. If you guys got any questions at any point, you go ahead and just let me know, and I'll try and answer them. Let's see here. Get my tempo. All right, that's a set of reels from Ireland. The first one is The Musical Priest, the second one is Toss the Feathers, and then that was Lucy Campbell's. All right.
Fabulous. Casey, a question came in asking, what is the bouzouki? Can you talk about that instrument?
Yeah, it's kind of a fun word if you're not sure that it actually is an instrument, isn't it? Yeah, the bouzouki is a, if you know what a mandolin is, okay, so a mandolin is kind of like about the size of a fiddle. Oftentimes it's in a teardrop shape, and they have 8 strings, so it's like 2 of each string. So that would be a mandolin. It's a fretted instrument. Now a bouzouki, like the violin is to a cello, as a mandolin is to a bouzouki. So the bouzouki is like a really big mandolin. You play it with a pick, and it's got those double strings, so it's a really, it has a lot of ringing to it. It's a really beautiful, beautiful instrument. And they play it in the word bouzouki, I believe, is maybe a Greek word. It's also within the Greek tradition. It's in the Irish tradition. It's in the Galician tradition. It's a fairly common one. Great question. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so let's continue in our Celtic areas here, but we're going to go over to Scotland. So I often have the question, like, if I hear something, how do I know if it's Irish or Scottish, you know, in a musical sense? And I've tried to get this answer, and it's not as clear as you might like it to be, but here's what has been explained to me. So if you think about the landscape, and the landscape of Ireland is very rolling and green, okay? And so the ornamentation and the way that they bow has a little bit more of a flow in a way to it. I think everything flows, but if we just imagine rolling, all right? Scotland, on the other hand, is a little more rugged and hard-edged. It's the landscape going north into the highlands there. It's a little craggier, and the rhythm of the playing is a little bit harder and maybe more forceful and a little more kind of rhythm to it. So these are generalizations, but that might help you distinguish the two. Sometimes it helps me as well. So in Scotland, check this out. A friend was giving us a place to stay, and traveling on the road with your family, just traveling to these different countries is challenging to keep everything straight, you know. And they said, okay, it's up in this place. You're going to go to Maleg, okay? And they also told me some more information, but all I really remembered was the name of that town. And when basically a couple days before getting there, realized that that was actually where you get the ferry from in order to get to the place where we were staying. So we ended up staying in this remote peninsula called Neudart, and it's not connected to the road system. You can either hike there for 20 hours, or you can take a ferry, and you can't bring your car. So we were staying out in this, what was the old dairy from this town, or in this peninsula. There are barely any stores there. There's like 100 people that live there. This was amazing. There's more deer around there than people. And the store, I'm thinking about my daughter here and our homeschooling situation. They have a little store, like if you need some supplies there, and like pasta sauce, whatever, kind of things like that. And there's nobody that tends the store. There's what's called an honesty box. And you go in, you write down the things that you buy, all the prices are listed, and all the money's in that box. You put your money in, you take your change, and it's the honesty box, and you take your food out with you. And so this was great for us to do as a family, and great for my daughter, because there's math class right there. So we didn't spend our whole time up on Neudart, although it was very beautiful. What I did is occasionally took the ferry over to meet with some musicians that were over on the other part of the land. And I had a really fortunate experience to meet with a fiddle player named Angus Grant. And he's considered a national Scottish treasure. He's a Highland fiddle player. So this is up in the Highlands. And is a particular style of fiddle playing, and he was like a herder, and he used to walk like miles and miles and miles to gigs, and then back to his job, and just a real special person. And he is a wealth of knowledge. So I went to his house, and I sat down at his table with him. His music all over it. He had some soup on in the kitchen, and we basically hung out for the afternoon. He told me stories that then led to fiddle tunes. He told me fiddle tunes that led to stories. He has his great-grandfather's fiddle from 1771 that I got the chance to play. It was a really special experience. Now, something interesting about him is that he used to be a piper. And piping requires both hands for the fingerings. Now, like a Highland piper, bagpiper. But he had an injury on his left hand that meant that he had to stop playing the pipes. So he still wanted to play music. Well, with the fiddle, you kind of just need one hand for the fingers. But normally we would use our left hand. Well, he didn't have that function, so he decided to play the fiddle left-handed. And so he could bow with the other hand. So I couldn't really play his fiddles very much because everything was totally opposite and backwards for me, but it was a really fun experience to sit down, and just an inspirational story that he had that, like you find ways to work around the situations that come to you in your life. So I'm going to play two of his tunes. They're compositions of his. The first one's called The West Coaster, and it's for the people of the Western Scotland, the Highlands, where he's from. And then the other one is called The Mariner, and apparently he had a buddy who went out one night, got drunk, and apparently met an Army recruitment officer, and the next morning found out that he had signed up for 10 years in the Navy and was shipping off. And he did it, and it was apparently a great experience for him. Like, he lived up to his commitment, and so Angus wrote this fiddle tune for him, and it's called The Mariner. So I'll do these two pieces. And this is the kind of stuff that sitting down with Angus, the whole day was like that, like, and this story is from this tune and this guy, and it was so great. These are our strathspeys, so they kind of have a little bit of a different rhythm, kind of that maybe jauntier rhythm, I guess I was trying to describe earlier. All right, those are a couple of Angus Grant tunes up there from the Highlands of Scotland.
Just wonderful.
Oh,
We had a
thanks.
question come in the Q&A. Someone is
Yeah.
curious how you got connected with all of these amazing traditional musicians. Did you meet them through friends? Did you meet them through research and then reaching out by email, a combination, something else?
All of the above. So I've been traveling musically, for a long time. So some of these people I knew beforehand. So I would get in touch. I would try and get in touch, see who was around. But these are traveling musicians too. So their lives are just all going everywhere, like mine. So sometimes they would be around, sometimes they wouldn't. But they would say, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to Neudart." "Oh, well, if you're going up there, boy, there's this fiddle player you should meet. Have you heard of him?" "No, I haven't." "Oh, you got to check him out." Okay. And you know what? My sister knows him, and I would love to put you two together. Like, fantastic. Okay, so then they would pass me a phone number or an email, and I would reach out to somebody, and I would have to introduce myself. Sometimes it would work out, sometimes it wouldn't. But it was basically a combination of all of what you were asking. We wanted to have a little bit of an idea. I wanted to know that I was going to meet with a couple of folks, but I also wanted to leave space for life to unfold as we were in these places. And I certainly met new people everywhere. So
Awesome.
Thanks.
Anne also sent in a question, wondering if you play a custom-built fiddle, because she's noticing that there are 5 strings and pegs, and she'd be interested to know more about the origins of your instrument.
Yeah, so this is, yes, very good. This is a 5-string fiddle, and the instrument was made by a man named John Silikowski, and he's in Scottsburg, Indiana, in the United States. 5-string instruments are getting a lot more popular these days. They used to be more just for electric, because it was hard to get an acoustic instrument to be able to carry the weight of a low string. So people have been developing their skills at making better versions of acoustic ones. Yeah.
Awesome. Then one other question came in, noticing how incredible your technique is and how incredible your intonation is, wondering if you have classical training in addition to all of your amazing folk and tradition.
About this much for classical training. What I did is I started with Suzuki, and my dad was a banjo player and a pedal steel guitarist, and so I was brought up with music around the house. I did public school orchestras. That's the extent of my classical, but I do read, and I ask people how they get better at how do you shift? How do you do such a great job? What did you study? And like, oh, check this book out, or here's something you can practice. And so now I would take those things. So it's always kind of like feeding myself from the people who really know how to do these things.
Awesome.
Well, speaking of feeding yourself with new techniques and experiences, let's go to India now. How about that? I had never been to India. My family had never been there. I was a little bit familiar with the Indian classical traditions, slightly. So I got the chance to collaborate with some folks there in that tradition. But then there are also a whole bunch of folk traditions in many different places too. And I got those experiences as well. Now, India, if you haven't been there, I will say it's amazing. We extended our trip we were there for 2 months. For my daughter, it was her least favorite place. For us, it was our favorite place. Just speaking of family situations here, it is very, very vibrant, and there is a lot of activity everywhere. It's so bright and colorful. The flavors, the smells, the sounds, everything is just up here to what my normal life experience has been, which is why we really, really loved it, my wife and I, because it was so different. And for my daughter, it was a little overwhelming at times, including this particular thing where we did get a lot of looks. Okay, so we're walking down the street, we would notice people were looking at us a bunch. And my daughter said, "I thought staring was not polite. I thought we weren't supposed to stare." And that's, of course, how we had generally that's our culture, right? And so she was uncomfortable with that in the beginning, and I was trying to figure out, well, what do we do about this? Because this is happening. I thought, well, why don't I just try smiling at people when they stare at me? And so somebody would stare at me, and so I smiled, and then all of a sudden they smiled, and I smiled, and then we had a moment. And so it became this thing that the icebreaker for us was, let's see how many smiles we can get from people. And then that opened itself to conversations. And basically, culturally, to me, it felt like people wanted to engage. And they were genuinely curious about where we were from, what we were doing. They would stop and they would tell us about a grandson of theirs that had been to the United States for college, or they had once traveled there, or they had a friend. I mean, if you're going to start smiling at people, you might be prepared to stop and talk for a while as well. So we found the people to be so welcoming and inviting, and it's fantastic. So that's a little bit of our experience there in India. But musically speaking here, let's talk about this one concept, this classical music concept. And now by classical, it's not Western classical, it's Indian classical. So tablas, violin, voice, various percussion, other percussion instruments. And there's a lot of math involved in these things. So I'm gonna record these things here. This is called the manjira. These guys right here. I'm gonna record them in a rhythm here just for a second, and then I'll show you something. Thank you. Okay, so now what happens is you have this amount of time. If you think of the start and the end of one of these bells, you can divide this in how many equal parts that you want. It would be 2. All right, it could be 3, or 4, 5, 6, 7. I can't clap that fast. Let me do it on the fiddle. That's 7 or 8. Okay. So this is a concept that I learned from a percussionist there named Bangalore Amrit. He plays the kanjira, which is a drum with skin head on it. It's about this big, maybe the size of a face, and it's got a set of jingles on it. And he's always taking a little bit of water and kind of getting some water on there so he can bend the pitches with his hand as well as he's playing it. So it's this smaller drum, and he just is the most amazing percussionist. So he introduced this concept to me, but like, okay, now what do we do? I get the concept, but now how do I do something with this? I don't know what we're going to do. So I took an old-time fiddle tune, take something familiar for me, and then try and introduce another concept to it. So what I'm going to do for you now is I'm going to, that idea where we just did all these divisions, I'm going to play this tune in like 5 different ways where we do those different divisions. So I'm going to start with 4, and I'm going to go to 5, I'm going to go to 6, I'm going to go to 7, and then I'm going to go to 8. And 8 at the end there is actually what the fiddle tune sounds like in my tradition, right? So I'm going to warm it up with just kind of the scale that I'm going to use, which is also coming from Indian classical tradition too. So let's see here. Oh, I'm also got this little buddy over here, and this is my Shruti box, so it gives me a little bit of a drone. hopefully it felt like it was speeding up as it was going, even though that little bell never changed. So that's that whole concept.
Incredible. Just incredible.
That was a really hard day for me. I will tell you, I'm still practicing that and trying to get more comfortable with it. But I mean, it's these experiences in these other countries and just taking a little bit of their traditions, because I'm never going to master their traditions. I am going to be inspired by their traditions, and I'm going to find new ways to play my instrument. And when we come together, we're going to do something that neither of us has ever done. And that's really the exciting connection that we have. Okay. Where should we go? We got 2 more countries on our stop here, a little road trip we're taking. Japan is next. So Japan, now, let me put this in perspective here. We were in India the beginning of 2020, and we were there until February 23rd. Okay, so the world knew about the coronavirus, and it was in basically China, Singapore, and Japan. And the next stop on our trip was Japan. We already had like non-refundable tickets and a place to stay. And it was like something to be cautious about, but it wasn't yet had exploded to what we now know today. So we decided to go there and just, be careful, I suppose, pay attention to what was going on in the world. Well, there weren't a whole lot of people like us that were going there. So for us, it was pretty amazing, because places that would normally have had a bunch of tourists there, like myself, were empty. Or they had local folks or just a few other people. But we were watching all these places start to close down around us, like museums were starting to close. So there were things that we couldn't do, but we took advantage of as much as we could. My daughter had her birthday while we were in Japan, and we were planning to take her to Universal Studios, and we were just watching stuff close everywhere, and we started to get worried, like, what if on her birthday it's not open? And we wanted, like, boy, that would be a bummer. So we decided to take her early, and we told her we were going to a bonsai garden just to sort of throw her off the scent. But which she didn't really like that idea. So it was really great when we showed up at Universal, and we had an amazing day, hardly any lines, and the next day they closed Universal. So like we got really, really lucky as a family in that situation. Okay, so musically in Japan, we were only there for about 3 weeks because we eventually decided to expedite our travels a little bit. But I did get to meet with some amazing musicians. I met with a biwa player. And the biwa is like this instrument that's held this way. It's played with a giant pick, and there's giant frets, and you press the notes and the frets down, like the strings are this far off, and you press them, and that the squishing of the string changes the pitch, right? Anyway, so I played this a biwa player, and she introduced a song called Sakura Sakura to me, which is Cherry Blossom, Cherry Blossom, Sakura. And I was asking about the tune, and they said I said, who wrote this? It's about 150 years old. I said, oh, okay, so it's a traditional tune. No, it's not old enough to be a traditional tune yet. Because you got to remember where you're at. And Japan has a much longer history than someplace in the United States, for example, in which, a traditional tune is probably something that's 50 years old, But anyway, to me, it felt traditional, and it's a song that everybody knows there. It's probably the first thing that everybody learns. That's my guess, and so now I know it. I will use the band for this one a little bit, and it's got a little bit different scale to it, a little bit different form as well. So it's kind of a fun one for me to play. So this is called Sakura Sakura. That's called Sakura Sakura from Japan.
Absolutely amazing. I don't know how many times I taught that in my years in elementary music classrooms, and I have never heard it like that. Brilliant.
Wow. So you know that as like as a standard, right?
Absolutely. Kids all over the place know that.
Yep. Yeah. It's I don't know. It's like I'm trying to think of the American equivalent. You know, like your first tune you teach people is like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Absolutely.
You know. So, but this one, I went to a recording session with some guys, amazing musician player, a shakuhachi player, which is the bamboo flute, and the shamisen, which is another, kind of sounds like a banjo. It's a big pick instrument. It's long neck. Anyway, they wanted to play this tune. So it's not, like if I went to a jam session here, I wouldn't be calling Twinkle Twinkle Little Star as the tune to play. But it is the tune that they still love playing. It's a beautiful piece of music that is like the entryway to as tradition, I believe.
Fabulous.
Got any questions out there floating around? We're doing good?
There was one that came up about a fiddle figure from Scotland, and so I'll ask you that after we go to your sixth country, because I think people are eager to get to country number 6.
Yeah. All right, so let's head on to Finland, shall we? I will say that Finland was one of the first countries that I traveled to as a professional musician. It was one of my first international trips. I was probably 21 or 22, and I went up to Haapavesi. They have a camp and a festival up there, so it's up kind of near Oulu, so it's kind of northern midway. And so one of my very first international experiences was Finland, and here we are for our trip, kind of rounding out our trip in Finland. It wasn't really how it was supposed to go, because when we were leaving Japan, we decided to leave Japan, and we said, okay, it's probably going to, this is the conversations with me and my wife, well, Japan, Singapore, and China, okay, it's probably a matter of time until things are rough here in Japan. We should probably think about going while we still can go. And okay, where should we go? Well, we're going to Europe next. That's great. Nothing's happening in Europe. Everything seems great there. Okay, so we booked our flights to Finland, and then within the week of time that we booked our flight, Spain shut down, Italy shut down, it was declared a pandemic, and the US stopped travel, and basically like just doors were slamming shut everywhere around the world, right? So we actually got to Finland, and then 36 hours later, the borders closed. And so while we thought we might go to Norway, and I had some gigs and some collaborations planned in Sweden and Estonia, Finland is where we ended up. And it was a fantastic experience. It was probably the best place we could have been to weather this storm, right? We were in the little town of Kaustinen, and there's a great folk festival that's there, and some great musicians that live there, and it's a place that's known for its fiddling tradition. So I was going up there to meet with some friends. I mean, this town is probably 5,000 people. It's 5.5, 6 hours from Helsinki up on the western coast. Looks like the theme is we go west, I guess, the western coast of places. And we had a little cabin there with a loft where we all slept. There's a sauna in the house. There was just a little living room, a tiny kitchen, and backed up to a river. And there was a giant fireplace, like this huge fireplace. Apparently it's more common there, but the kind of thing where you build a fire maybe in the morning, and then it's all enclosed, and it heats up the sandstone all around it, and it heats up the rest of the house because it just radiates the heat to the rest of the house, rather than like stoking a fire all day long. So it was our first time seeing snow in a long time, so for my daughter it was amazing. It snowed like 3 times there. We did an Easter egg hunt in the snow, and what else did we do? Well, Finland also has this much different than the U.S. I think it's called the Everyman's Right, and it's the right to roam and explore, whether it's your property or not. And that is a much different experience than in the U.S., right? So during the time of COVID, we could actually go and hike. and there's tons of trails, tons of outdoor activity. And so like for us to be someplace to be in a cozy little cabin in a town with a couple of fiddle players that I knew and a couple of musicians, and to be able to be outside, it was really kind of a magical experience for us. But we had to quarantine when we first arrived, and my buddy Esko Jarvala also had to quarantine. And then because he was traveling, after we both were finished with that, we met for the first socially distant whatever, and we met at this fiddle house, and we didn't have to wear masks yet, but we kept our distance, right? And he said, okay, here, I brought some books for you. And this is one of the books that he brought for me. And they call it, they generally refer to it as VPS. And it's this book that is just like full of melodies. It's like the whole thing is melodies, right? So he brought me this book and a couple of other books and told me a couple of his favorite tunes that he had been, enjoying lately. So I went back and I started learning them. Now, I played as much music in Finland as I did in any of these other countries, but the difference was that I played music with the same people on a regular basis in Finland versus like hopping from one person to the next. So that meant that I got to actually learn some music, and work on some things. And because before it was just meeting during the day and let's see what happens, because this is all the time we got. So it changed the musical experiences a little bit. Not better or worse, it's just a different experience, that's all. Esko's got a couple of kids, so finally my daughter got to hang out with some folks. That was great. And yeah, Finland was amazing for us. So they have a tradition there, a type of a tune called a polska, which is I don't think we have them in the U.S. really, unless you're up in Minnesota or perhaps Decorah or Wisconsin. Okay, and the polska is it's in 3, but it's not a waltz. All right, so what I knew before of 3 was waltzes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Right. So this, you tap your foot on 1 and 3 like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So that's the general rhythm that happens with the polska. And in my tradition, 4/4 is probably the main operating mode. Up there, it feels like 3 is really more the operating mode. And for me, that was really, really exciting because I don't have a lot of experience I can play waltzes, but it's not like playing waltzes. So I don't have experience improvising in this and playing chords and just how it all works. And I would get into many discussions with my friends up there about like, how do I do this? And like, no, that doesn't feel right. Help, please help, So anyway, I got a polska. It's called the Olpalasten Polska, and it comes out of this book here that I was going to play. And this is one that Esko showed to me. Let's see here. Make sure the band is ready. Oh, I don't need that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little of that kind of foot tapping rhythm going here, and I'll show you what that. Make sure you get your head in the right place, and then I'll play the tune. All right, so we got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's where it's at. So there's a tune from Finland.
That was just amazing. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
All right, we are nearing the end of our time. Casey has one more tune that he's going to play for us here in just a minute, but I want to extend a huge thank you to Casey on behalf of everybody at Vesterheim, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. You can listen to more of Casey's music on Spotify or at caseydriessen.com. Or if you want to stay in touch and keep up to date with all of the latest happenings, you can follow him on Instagram at Casey Driessen, Driessen. A thank you to our collections, exhibitions, development, accounting, and communications and marketing teams for everything they do to help make events like this possible behind the scenes. A recording of today's concert will be available on our YouTube channel soon. You'll receive a survey right after this program. For most folks, it will open in the window when you close the concert. In order to help us better serve you, we are interested in your feedback and appreciate your thoughts. If you're looking for more ways to connect with Vesterheim online, we hope you'll join us on Sunday, August 21st for the next event in our FamilieTid series of free online family programming. Celebrated food writer and author Nevada Berg from North Wild Kitchen will be teaching us how to make one of her family's favorite Norwegian recipes and experience the joy of cooking together with loved ones. We also have upcoming Familie Club classes where you and your family can explore Scandinavian traditions like weaving, baking, paper cutting, and needle felting, all from the comfort of your own home and on your own schedule. Learn more about our upcoming programming at folkartschool.vesterheim.org. Registration for August and September is open now, and October through December opens this Tuesday at noon. There will also be new additions to Vesterheim's YouTube channel during Nordic Fest, so make sure you check back often this week to see what is new. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider becoming a member or contribute a gift online. These programs would not be possible without folks like you. As we like to say, you cannot have a folk art school without the folks. We hope you will join us again soon. And now, without any more of me, here is Casey with one more tune to send you out the door. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, this has been such a pleasure. It's, I love sharing about these people, these amazing people that I met, and about this music that I've been learning too. I'm dying to get back out there and travel again, as so many people are as well. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of a glimpse into a couple of different traditions if you weren't familiar with them. At my Spotify page there, I made inspiration playlists for every country that I went to. And this was my own research that I was doing to get my head in the game for these places. You know, I was just listening to all this different music from these countries. And so I basically put it together if you want to check out some of those things. Now, they're not comprehensive of the traditions. That's impossible for me to do. But it was inspiring for me, and it might send you down some interesting pathways. So there's some playlists that you can check out. And then I see somebody is interested in how do we get this recording afterwards. I believe Vesterheim, it's going to be at the YouTube channel that you guys have. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yep, that's the plan. Yep. Okay. And we'll be in touch with you ahead of time in case there's anything that you want tweaked or anything, but the plan is for it to go up as is.
Perfect, perfect. So this last tune that I'll play, it's another Finnish tune. And so here's something that happened to me on a number of occasions when I was traveling around, is that somebody would play a song and it would remind me of one that I knew from my tradition. And so this is the tune from Finland is Ruusulan Kian, I believe. And let me play it. I'll just play it one time through, and then I'll play the tune that it reminded me of, and then I'll kind of play them together. So, So that's the one that Esko showed me. He's like, hey, you should check this tune out. Okay, so I said, do you know this one? Because that reminds me of this one. And this is called June Apple. So they're both the same length in structure. They both have some similar arches, places that they go melodically. They do some of the similar harmony things. I mean, they're different tunes, but I don't know. Like Esko and I we're 5-string fiddle brothers from different places, right? So it's like I feel like these tunes are that way too. So I'll play the first tune a couple times, and then I will use my looper to go ahead and stack the two parts together, at least the A parts of them, so you kind of hear that happening at the same time. So thanks everybody for hanging out. Really, really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon.